This is the sensational experimental lavender plant bed. This was created last fall. Yes, using my custom soil blend, and then planting little bitty baby sensational plants all right next to each other as an experiment to see how they would grow through the coming spring. Meanwhile, they've overwintered. That meant that they bloomed. That gave me plants to harvest from, as well as a focal point when they were in bloom. Prior to bloom, I did transplant some. About 6 a.m. This is the best time for me to water all the plants, meaning in the hoop house and the potting, the little huts, which are not hoop houses but do the same thing. Plants along the tables, just getting everybody watered before it gets too hot this morning, and when it is the best time to get them nicely watered for a nice hot sunny day that's coming. So here quickly. This is the bed that was created using my special soil mix, and that's been mentioned many times. But these plants were put in the fall, very small baby plants, very, very close together, with the intention that instead of keeping them in pots over winter, we keep them in the ground, and then we bring them out and pot them for transplanting. Which has been working, and I'm very, very happy about that. Not a good idea to be pulling them up while they're blooming like this. So I've got some that I've taken out. The rest I'm going to kind of go into phase 3 on this and leave them to bloom, harvest the blooms, transplant them afterwards, and move them into other areas. And then we have other plants we will be putting in here with some additional new soil to regenerate it. And then overwintering some plants close together in this area. I think I don't know how many hundreds of phenomenal we had in here from last fall, but it was hundreds. And so I like this process. It's easy to tend to, and once they're in, you can just walk away after a few weeks once they're rooted and well, depending on the weather and the heat and the rain and so on and so forth, as to how much you need to water them initially, and then after that you can stop. These are the ones that were transplanted just a few days ago. They're doing great. They're getting all whirly curly. I call them the Medusas, because when you transplant, when they're in the process of blooming, they wilt down a little bit until they get settled when they go into the little transplant shock. So we end up with the ones that were already blooming starting to sort of fade and then come back, and they get all squirrely. And then of course, once you harvest that, the rest will come up in the future as straight. But I think this is kind of fun. It's kind of a fun look. I might call them my little designers. You know, if you want wavy medusas, we can make it happen. I think it's kind of cute. Anyway, these are called spike lavenders, this type, and that's because when it blooms, it comes up in a straight spike, and that's what you harvest and what you create bundles with and do other wonderful lavender things with. So these spikes, as you see, can be wavy. Another experimental, these are all royal velvets that I put in last fall over in their other experimental bed. What you see there, those are sensational. We had about 10 or 11 royal velvets that were planted alongside the sensational over here, which I just harvested out, transplanted into pots. These were done yesterday, I believe, early morning. Oh, look, the bee is happy. Cue the bee. Anyway, so again, same thing. We put them in, definitely they're happier with the bigger pots, more soil when they're coming out of being in the ground. And these, the royal velvets are the high culinary grade lavender, which we use in our seasoning. They can be propagated. You can make cuttings and create more plants because these are not trademarked and they are a hybrid. So that's a fun fact of something I discovered while researching this, because we need more grown so that we can harvest it and use it for our lavender seasoning that is such a big hit now. It's an all-purpose savory seasoning, and the royal velvet is key to that. So our farmers and ourselves here on our farm, we're going to be growing royal velvet here in Tennessee, and one farm also in Virginia, and that way we can have direct harvest from the farmers that are part of my group that's called the Lavender Exchange. Okay, royal velvet doing beautifully, and again, it blooms differently. This is what we're learning. It has this very wispy, really interesting plant. Unlike, this is the sensational that was just transplanted yesterday. It's doing beautifully. It did not wilt. It is staying strong. I've given it lots and lots and lots of water constantly, and that seems to be part of the secret when it's first transplanted, plus a big pot with lots of soil. And it is not doing a Medusa. Anyway, the royal velvet is, let me think what I was going to say. It seems to be an early bloomer. These are well underway on the blooming, as are the ones that I have out in my field here, in my experimental field that we planted the same time last fall as these were. And that's definite. These guys like to bloom early. So if you're planting your garden and or your field, if you do your royal velvets and then you do your phenomenals or your sensationals, you will have color in May, because these started blooming in May. Everybody else comes in June here in the south with the humidity and our particular climate. Again, these are sensationals here that I decided, this one when I repotted it yesterday so it wouldn't wilt and get wonky, I decided to cut all of its blooms right away and give all the energy into its roots going, because right now while they're blooming they have the energy going into the blooming. These were potted a couple of weeks ago, and before I realized, and as you can see, here's one of its blooms that was starting, and instead of having the chance to continue straight up as this one has, the shock was too much, the pot was too little, something, and I left the blooms on and they just sort of fell over, but the plant is alive, so I can trim all this back and kind of do what this one did, but I'm just leaving it so I can see what happens next. And that is the whole point of all of this, is experimental explorations, education, sharing with everyone. And who knew you could create medusas? Well, I bet other lavender farmers knew. I'm just learning, and thanks for learning alongside me. Lavender love, you guys.